I did send email saying that the final version of the study guide was out. It's in the references folder, right? It's a short study guide. And the most important concepts related to the assignments in module 3, right? And the solution are basically the topics that we review in that study guide. So it's very straightforward, right? The assessment is actually a bit shorter than usual. So each question is worth more, but the duration for the assessment is shorter also. So you have 30 minutes to finish, but I think there's 10 or 12 questions, and then there's a couple of extra credit items, right? The goal is to get your first attempt log before the end of the week, which would be 11:59 p.m. Saturday, right? And I hope you've seen these things and received them in your email and notifications and so on. And if you haven't, I need you to let me know as soon as possible because we've been having some challenges with some of our systems, okay? Now, we have a special topic, and I'd like to do some fun stuff to kind of demonstrate the power of what becomes possible in an Active Directory domain environment. It completely changes how you can work with operating systems. In fact, Active Directory is or could be considered an extension of the operating system so that your local client or server operating system becomes converted into what some refer to as a network operating system. Now, I'm oversimplifying, and there are traditional computer science subject matter experts that would say, well, technically, a network operating system, or NOS, would be consistent with the following, Unix operating systems and so on and so forth. I want you to understand that Windows has been around a long time and it's been catching up with more robust, more advanced network-based operating systems that were dominant 25, 30 years ago. But in the year 2000, things changed. And Microsoft found a way to extend operating system functionality across an enterprise by using a directory-based concept, right? There's an architecture here that I think I use the word directory, right? So when you think of being able to look up things in a directory, you have this Active Directory of enterprise resources and objects. And that becomes the platform and the method for how you can integrate all of the resources seamlessly. Now there's a lot of components in the mix, but there are some primary ones. So when we talk about Active Directory, DNS is sort of like a linchpin for that. And we've been hammering this idea that having DNS locally is really advantageous. And in fact, this acronym, LDAP, stands for Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. And there you have the directory idea again, right? Kerberos is a method that was devised at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And it is a more advanced, it's been around for quite a while, but it allows this Active Directory environment to extend and protect the resources on the basis of trust. So the whole concept centers on the notion of trust, and it's linked to time synchronization. So when you start working across a network with computer systems and operating systems, hackers discovered a long time ago that if you just capture the network traffic, you can simply replay the network traffic if you happen to catch someone logging on. It's called a replay attack. Has anyone ever heard of a replay attack before? A replay attack.
No, never heard of that.
Yeah, it's a very simple but elegant and powerful way to exploit connected systems. So all you do is capture the username and the login, and then you connect to the machine that was accessed, and you replay the data stream. You just play it back, just push it out there. And you don't have to worry about what their login account was or their password entered. It's all part of the data stream, right? Kerberos was a solution to that problem. But one of the Achilles heels of the Active Directory environment, and I want to tell you that the Active Directory environment since the year 2000 has become a de facto standard worldwide. The US Army, the United States Army, operates a single domain in that Active Directory context for at one time for all assets for the United States Army worldwide. US Army Europe, right? In the Middle East, all the divisions in the States. When you think about that, 1 million systems all working out of the same enterprise environment. So this is the stuff that can be used to create the infrastructure that runs and operates Fortune 500 companies, multinational corporations, global sized nonprofit organizations, the United Nations, the European Union. We're talking about huge, and never mind state governments, territorial governments, and the same principles that make it work, that keep it smooth and reliable, are the same principles that you've been practicing and working with in Module 3. And we spent a lot of time just becoming comfortable, and we actually repeated some of the activities so that you'd get a kind of so that you'd become comfortable working in that environment. What we're going to do in this module, this final mini module, we're going to call this a mini mod, right? So this is going to be like a mini module. We're going to explore the enterprise environment we call Active Directory, a domain environment. And this is similar to public domains out on the internet, except that it's relevant to the organization. So you create a domain, and that's local to the organization. It's not necessarily public internationally, right? So when you have an Active Directory domain, you create a DNS domain for that organization, but that's apart from the internet, the public internet. And that's a very important distinction to make when we talk about domain with regard to Active Directory and DNS. DNS is what we use on the internet every day for web and email and to find resources. But an Active Directory domain is a way of taking all the different systems and putting them under one umbrella, one central management capability. Once you have that domain, and by the way, in the world, in open source terms, in Linux, you create what's known as a realm, R-E-A-L-M, realm, like the realm of a kingdom, right? Or, the realm of a king would be called a kingdom. So a realm in Linux terms, or a domain in Active Directory, you can create these objects called group policy objects and apply them to groups of objects. And by using those policy objects, you can define things like what kind of desktop people have when they log into the screen. When they log into a system anywhere, a custom desktop, a custom display or wallpaper can be applied. You can also, with those group policy objects, enforce a way to carry user documents and directories anywhere somebody logs in. So what are we talking about? You can still see my screen, yes?
Yeah.
So I'm logged in with my TC Kentop account, but I also have a separate account in here called Corbin. And inside the user's directory is where user account profiles are stored. Can everybody see this ntuser.dat?
Yeah, I can see the DAT file.
Yeah, that's called that's a local profile, which means that when the user named Corbin logs in, Corbin sees different desktop contents, has a separate documents folder. The links and shortcuts in the web browsers are stored in favorites. You know this already, right? There's a music directory where music is stored if they use Spotify or they use iTunes, doesn't matter. Pictures are stored, videos are stored. You get the point, right? These are the directories that compose a user's profile. And when you log in and a different user has a different desktop, different data files and so on, those are stored inside the user's folder, user's directory. And essentially in a domain environment, what happens is that you can liberate the local profile and store it on a server, and then in the domain environment you can provide roaming profiles where a user can log in, and when they log in, this login script fires off, and it provides a home directory, and the home directory floats with their logins, and essentially all of the contents of this structure here are transplanted from that server. Put another way, the user data is stored on the server where it's backed up daily. It's not stored on the desktop. And so you can go to any system anywhere. Now, UVI probably has 300 desktop computers in all the offices. University of the Virgin Islands probably has 300 desktop computers. And if you were to set up an Active Directory domain, and they have an Active Directory domain, if you were to set it up the right way, you could go anywhere to any screen on either campus, log in, and you'd see the same thing, and it would all be there, and you'd never have to move a thumb drive from screen to screen or station to station. You'd never have to have an external hard drive. You'd never have to have stuff pushed out into the cloud where, you know, you're using OneDrive, so you have to connect to OneDrive, which means you always have to log in. Now, we're familiar with Google Drive, OneDrive, and so on, and people are used to the idea of putting their data in directories and folders in OneDrive or in Google Drive. But the truth is, in a corporate environment, in a large organization where you have high-speed local networks, you don't have the same delays. When I click into OneDrive and I want to see what's in my OneDrive, if I go ahead and search that out, I have to be logged in properly. Then I have to connect to my Office 365 profile. Then I have to go out onto the internet, and that pulls my data down from a Microsoft data center. So that's in the cloud, right? OneDrive is in the cloud. That's why they use the icon the way they do. If you don't have internet access, you're screwed. The other problem is that it's very slow. If you have a lot of large content, a lot of streaming media, it tends to be very slow. Well, with Active Directory, Microsoft provides all the resources that you need to build this out. And when you're using a local network, the performance difference is literally a thousand times faster. The trick is to learn how to work these login scripts. And so one of the things that I was hoping to show you is how some of this works, and then have you try some of it on for size, okay? So can you still see my screen?
Yep.
All right, so I have a domain environment, and I'm gonna ask you to set up the Microsoft, well, let's see. All right, let me jump back out here. I'm gonna ask you to install the Microsoft Remote Desktop app from the Microsoft Store, right? So if you look on your start menu, there's Microsoft Store. And if you go to the Microsoft Store, you can type in Microsoft Remote Desktop. You should see a logo like this. And what I'll do is set up a login and a password based on your student ID. Okay.
And should we do this on the VM or the host machine?
That's a great question. You're going to do this on your host machine. You'll do this on your host machine. If you have problems doing it on your host machine, you can do it on your virtual machine. But I want you to be able to use, I want you to be able to use your host machine without worrying about loading your virtual machine, right? And what will happen is that I'll give you a network address, an IP address, and a port. And so what you'll do is you'll use the port number and IP address number. When you connect, you'll set up a profile to connect to a system that will belong to you. And it'll belong in that domain environment. But before we get out there, I want to share something else with you. This is something that you can do right now. And yeah, this is something you can do right now. And how many of you are familiar with the idea of an environment variable? Do you know what an environment variable is?
I don't know.
Okay. So if you go into File Manager and you select this PC, and you right click and you go to Properties, and then you go to Advanced System Settings, right? Does everybody see this? System Properties.
Yes.
Okay, have you ever heard of the term path? Where a file,
like the path for a file, right? Yeah.
path to a file, right? If I click here, I have this file, it's a Debian install file, and the path is the root of the drive, the directory it's in, any subdirectories, and the file name itself. That's the full path of that data file, right? So as I'm looking at this, in the advanced tab under system properties, we have this thing called environment variables. And one of the coolest things about environment variables is that there's all sorts of common information that's stored in there, like the path. And this is one that's really cool. Right here. Does everybody see username?
Yeah.
Okay. So right now the username is system, but actually in a domain environment, when you log in, and I'm going to show this to you, okay? Inside the domain, so I'm going to transition here to this remote system. What we have here is a huge machine. It's a host, and it is used to run 12 different servers. So basically we have 4 of these now, and we'll be setting up new systems for student users. But what I'd like to do is log into one of the systems here and just use my domain account, and that's what I'll set up for you. Yours will be your first initial and your last name, right? So now I'm on a machine that's basically rigged as a web server or a file server, I'm pretty sure. And when I log in, yeah, so it's running some file services. All right. So basically what I can do, I can set up some resources. Let's see how much space I have here on Virgo. Yeah, I got like 40 gigs here, okay? So I'm gonna set up a directory called profiles, okay? And let's see, who do we have here? Well, I thought Kareem was in the mix. I guess he's dropped in and out, maybe. Oh, James.
I think it was James. I think he's kind of
James.
going
Okay.
in and out.
Yep. James, you still with us?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, so I'm going to show you exactly how we set this up, right? To do roaming user profiles. Yeah. So I'm going to create 2 user files or 2 user accounts. And I'm going to create a login account that's your first initial and your last name. So for Milrain Grand, it's going to be M Grand and J Warner, correct?
Yeah.
And then J Warner. And if I go to a prompt, if I open up a command prompt here, if I put in CMD and I load this. You know what the echo command does, right?
Nope, never used it. I
It-
mean, like you're talking about the command that we could find in Windows Defender.
No, not echo in Windows Defender.
Oh, okay.
So-
Then yeah, I'm not sure.
Right, so I can basically echo the content of certain variables. And if I follow the echo command with some characters in quotation marks, when I hit enter, it's going to echo those characters, right? You saw what just happened there, right? So if I say echo username, that's going to say echo username. But if I do this and I do something a little different, where I use a percent in the front and a percent in the back, that tells this command, oh, I want to use a system variable that will return the username that's logged in. And remember, what do we say your username is going to be? It's going to match what this folder is, right? M Grand J Warner, right? So I'm logged in here. And what you see is my login, my username. And somewhere I have a directory that has the same exact set of characters. The directory matches my username. Now I do that as a practice, as a convention, because when I'm storing user profiles, if I see this directory for a user, I know which user account it's for. Does that make sense? You got to have some common sense, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So when I create your user accounts and your logins, I'm going to give you remote access to a server. And then what we're going to do is set this up, and inside here, I'm going to duplicate the same set of directories that you see in the user profiles, right? What were these that we were talking about here? Oh, there's an app data folder, a contacts, desktop, documents, downloads, right? All of this. I'm going to go ahead and have an exact duplicate of all these directories sitting on that server. And then once I get in here, right, on another system, I'm going to set up that replaceable parameter, that replaceable environment variable, right? Percent username percent. And I'm going to use it to connect that directory in the system I just built, right? This directory inside here. It's going to connect Jay Warner. Every time Jay Warner logs in, it's going to pull his user name from the environment variable, and it'll say, oh, this is Jay Warner. And it'll connect automatically the home directory or H drive. And inside there is going to be the documents, the desktop, right? And pictures. Now, the fun part is on each machine, you can basically go in here and you can point these to another place. In a domain environment, there is a location tab and you can point it to that documents folder on the server. It's like knitting a sweater where you have so many links And as long as you can create some of these consistent directories, when you go to other machines and you log in, if it sees, oh, it's Jay Warner, then it's going to pull from this server instead of the local profile, right? And that's what we mean by a roaming profile. Now, I'm going to have a separate video and a separate assignment for this mini mod where you log in and you do some things to watch how this works. And so that's part of what we're going to do for this this module. I do want to talk a little bit about, with the time remaining, in order for this to work well, your local network has to be healthy. And there are 3 components. Now, we cover this in the network class, so this is going to be a little redundant if you're already taking the network class 243. But then there's a reason for there's a reason for bringing this up. So one of the things that really creates havoc is that people go out and they buy cheap network switches, right? So if you go to, let's just go to Office. Is it Office Max or Office Depot on the island?
I think it's Office Max. Office Max.
Office Max, right? If I go to Office Max and I want to create a local network environment that's very fast, and so I can do all of this stuff seamlessly. And let's say I have an organization with 12 employees, and I want each of those 12 employees to be able to move from screen to screen to screen. It doesn't matter where they are. When they log in, they just get their stuff on the screen. It's stored on a server. It's backed up every day. So it's 1,000,000 times more reliable. So when you store things on a server, it's 1,000 times more reliable than a desktop. When you store things on a server that's backed up nightly, it's 1,000 times 1,000, so it's when you do the math, it's literally 1,000,000 times more reliable. Everybody thinks that if you take a thumb drive, a USB thumb drive, and you get a copy of your work, or you put it in the cloud subscriptions and accounts can be hacked. They can be encrypted just like any other data file with ransomware. The other thing that's serious is that most people don't know USB drives are really designed to only read and write a couple thousand times. And if they go through the wash or they're left in a hot place, then okay, you just knocked 500 reads and writes off of your lifetime, right? So everybody keeping their stuff on a USB thumb drive, surprise, that'll end badly. In the business world, the reason that people have stuff they can depend on is because they don't depend on the internet and they don't depend on thumb drives. They build their own networks and they have a server that they back up. Now, when you buy a switch at Costuless or Office Max, most people want to save money, right? But does everyone see this word right here? Unmanaged, right? So how many ports do we get out of here? 24 connections. And it costs $165. Wow. So if you want a really high-speed network in an office building, what's the cost per port? Well, it's $166 divided by 24. Oh, that's like $6.91 to create a very fast cabled network, right? And that's all it costs for the switch. The problem is the word unmanaged. One of the things that you should do if you're going to work any organization with 6 employees or larger right? And when you think about it, that's a lot of different organizations. What you want to do is buy a managed switch. Now, a managed switch costs a little bit more. So if I insert this idea of managed switch, okay, so the same 8-port switch, instead of being $40, is now $95. So it's still under $100, but what can you do with a managed switch? You can set up extra criteria so that when devices are turned on or connected, they have to get their DHCP from a certain, from a designated DHCP server. And that DHCP server will then tell them where to get their DNS. And their DNS in turn tells them how to connect to the domain they're a part of. This is how things remain so reliable in an office, in an office building where people are working serious tasks, every minute they're on the screen, and they need fast, reliable access to all their data, their phones and everything. That's what makes it happen. Managed switches are a few dollars more, but basically they allow you to hardwire how machines connect, and the how includes which DNS. You can also include something called an IP helper, so you can take multiple sets of switches and string them together, and you can have all of them saying, hey, we should all get our we should all get our network addresses from this one machine, right? This DHCP system. So everybody has the same DNS, everybody has the same gateway, you have a lot more control over what's going on, instead of people just using a cheap switch. More importantly, you can bind ports together so that you can start monitoring network traffic. You can do something called VLANs, or virtual LANs. It allows you to create a local area network just for a certain group of users, not based on the, how many switches do you have locally. You could have 17 different switches and have 6 different people in different buildings on those switches, and they're all on the same local network. They all see each other and they don't see anybody else because of the virtual local network capability, right? So you have a lot more control, and the most important thing is that your reliability and your security are improved dramatically. Now, this scales up pretty well, so everybody sees the word managed, and in the business world, if you see things like Cisco, people talk about how many thousands of dollars they have to spend on this. You don't have to spend a lot of money to get something decent. So we just showed you what it cost. It was like $9, something like that, wasn't it? For an unmanaged.
I think if I look at the price.
Yeah, it was like $9. Well, if you look at a 48-port gigabit Ethernet switch, and this was done just this last year, $320 for 48 ports. So if I look at what that costs, $320 divided by 48. Oh, look. See, if I go big and I go the right way, it's not any more expensive. But the trick is it has to be a managed switch. Now, a managed switch also, a lot of managed switches will run the DHCP themselves. So, or you can tell that managed switch, we're not going to do any net BIOS. So you can get rid of the security problems just because they're connected that way. If you have voice phones, when you have a managed switch, you can say, okay, I want a better quality of service for my telephones because I don't want hiccups. I don't want lags or crappy sounds. Has anyone here ever been on an office telephone and it's just scratchy and there's a lot of echo and it's terrible quality, right? Has anybody ever experienced that?
I don't think so. I'm
No?
not sure.
Okay. Well, in larger enterprises where they have phones connected to the same data network, you'll want that managed capacity so that you can tell the network, okay, when it comes to certain kinds of network traffic, I want my video surveillance cameras to have better quality. I want my telephones to have better quality because I have to be able to, if the network's hosed because some hacker is on my web server, I still want to be able to call 911. So these are things that are really important to understand, but most people are trying to save a few bucks. And when they go online, they'll just get the cheapest thing. And cheap is okay, so long as it has the word managed in the mix, okay? As soon as you have a managed switch, you can do the kinds of things that you need to set the stage, like the IP helper and the DHCP and so on, okay? That's the first piece, and it's the physical piece for a domain enterprise environment. If you've had the computer network course, CSC 243, you know about the 7 layers of networking or 5 layers of networking. And the most important one that everybody screws up and they don't think about is that physical layer. This is your physical layer right here. And you don't want to cut costs. You don't want to be so cheap that you hurt yourself. So essentially, if you don't have a managed switch and you don't set it up right, then the cheapest unmanaged switches are a hacker's delight. They can basically run their way around all over your network, and you don't have definition for your network. And that's the physical layer that allows the enterprise environment and an Active Directory domain to work properly. We said it was time sensitive, right? So you have to synchronize system clocks, and that time synchronization and that network efficiency, basically Kerberos doesn't work as well in that domain environment if you don't have a tight, smooth, fast, and hot network. So yeah, having the local DNS server is a must. So you want to have your own DHCP server, you want to have a local DNS server, and you want to have managed switches. Those are the 3 main pieces. If you have those 3, then you can have a local network that is easily 2 to 3 times faster than what most people experience everywhere else. And that's not an exaggeration. It's what I've done for the last 25 years. Everywhere I've been, people are amazed. Like, oh, you got to buy a new switch? That's going to be thousands. No, it isn't. Oh, but we have to no. It's the physical layer. So this is just gets back to that. This is the piece you have to remember here. You should commit this to memory, okay? This one part. So now we're on page 3 of the study guide. We'll cover the last 4 pages. There's going to be more diagrams and stuff, so it'll go pretty quickly. We'll demonstrate some things on Monday, and I'll have a video for you to watch by then. Are there any questions before we clear for the day?